Quinn Davenport was reaching for a sack of grain when a massive green hand closed over his wrist, and a voice like honey and gravel announced to the entire marketplace, "Husband, let me carry that for you." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Quinn found himself staring up into amber eyes set in a face that was undeniably orcish green skin, small tusks protruding from her lower lip, pointed ears, and undeniably beautiful in a way that made his breath catch. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with broad shoulders and corded muscle visible beneath the rough spun tunic she wore. Her black hair was pulled back in a thick braid that fell past her shoulders, and she was looking at him with an expression of such earnest devotion that his mind went completely blank. Around them, the marketplace of Crossfin had gone silent. Quinn could feel every eye turning toward them, could sense the shock rippling outward like stones thrown into still water. Humans and the few orcs who traded here alike had stopped their haggling and conversations to stare at the spectacle. A human man being claimed as husband by an orc woman neither he nor anyone else had ever seen before. Quinn's voice came out as barely a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I think you have me confused with someone else." The orc woman's expression faltered for just a moment, something vulnerable flickering across her features before her jaw set with determination. "No confusion," she said, her voice dropping lower so only he could hear, though her hand remained firmly on his wrist. "Please, I need you to not question this right now." There was desperation beneath the words, carefully controlled but unmistakable. Quinn had spent 3 years as a soldier on the northern border before an arrow to the knee had sent him home to try his hand at farming his late father's land. He knew the sound of someone running from something dangerous. His better judgment warred with his curiosity, and something else a strange pull toward this mysterious woman who had chosen him, of all people, for whatever scheme she was running. The sensible thing would be to pull away, to publicly deny any connection to her. Orcs and humans did not marry. The very idea was scandalous, possibly dangerous depending on who took offense. But Quinn had never been entirely sensible, and there was something in those amber eyes that made him want to know her story. "Right," he heard himself say. "Of course. Would you mind grabbing that sack for me then?" He gestured to the grain he had been reaching for. "My knee has been bothering me today." Relief washed over her face so intensely that Quinn felt something twist in his chest. She released his wrist and hefted the 50-pound sack as though it weighed nothing, tucking it under one arm. "Anything else you need, husband?" The whispers had started now, spreading through the market like wildfire. Quinn could hear fragments. "Never seen her before. Disgraceful. Wonder if his family knows. Probably some orc trick." He needed to get them out of here before things escalated. Quinn had lived in Crossfin all his life and knew exactly how quickly fear could turn to violence, especially where orcs were concerned. "That is everything," Quinn said, keeping his voice steady. He paid the grain merchant, a man named Horace, who looked like he had swallowed something sour, and started walking toward the road that led out of the village. The orc woman fell into step beside him, matching her longer stride to his slightly limping one without comment. They walked in silence until the sounds of the market faded behind them. Quinn's small farm was about a mile outside Crossfin proper, nestled in a valley where the soil was good and a creek provided reliable water. It was not much a single-room cabin, a barn that needed repairs, and 20 acres that he had been trying to coax into productivity, but it was his. When they were well away from any prying eyes or listening ears, Quinn stopped walking and turned to face his supposed wife. "All right, start explaining." The orc woman set down the grain sack carefully, then straightened to her full height. "Up close, Away from the shock of the moment, Quinn could see more details. She had a scar across her left eyebrow, and her hands bore the calluses of someone accustomed to hard physical labor. She was younger than he had first thought, probably close to his own, 24 years, and beneath the desperation, there was intelligence in her eyes. "My name is Makora," she said, "and I apologize for putting you in that position without warning. I had no other choice." "That is a start, but not really an explanation," Quinn pointed out, trying to keep his voice level despite the strangeness of the situation. "Why did you call me your husband? And why did you look so terrified in that marketplace?" Makora's jaw worked for a moment, as though she was wrestling with how much to tell him. Finally, she let out a long breath. "I am running from my clan. More specifically, I am running from the male. They want me to marry a warrior named Garn, who has already killed one wife for failing to bear him sons. When a female refuses a chosen match among my people, she can claim she is already married to avoid the union, but she must present her husband as proof within 30 days or be dragged back to face punishment for lying." Quinn felt his eyebrows climb toward his hairline. "So you saw a random human man in a market and decided to claim him as your husband to avoid being killed by your intended." "You were not random," Makora said quickly. "I have been watching Crossfin for 3 days, trying to determine who might be most likely to help me. You live alone. You are kind to the merchants even when they try to cheat you on prices. You have a limp that kept you from joining the hunting party that left yesterday, which means you will be here and available if my clan sends scouts. And—" She hesitated, a green flush darkening her cheeks. "And you did not look at me with disgust just now. You looked curious." The assessment was both flattering and unsettling. Quinn tried to process everything she had told him while ignoring the small voice in his head that was pointing out how striking she looked when she blushed. "So what exactly do you need from me?" he asked. 30 days, Makora said. "If I can present you as my husband to my clan's witnesses, they will have to accept the marriage and leave me alone. After that, I can disappear, make a new life somewhere far from here. You would never have to see me again. But we would have to actually convince them we are married," Quinn said slowly. "Which means what? That you live here, that we pretend to be a couple?" "Yes." Makora met his eyes steadily. "I know it is a great deal to ask of a stranger. I can work. I am strong. I can help with your farm, repairs, whatever you need. I can hunt and cook. I will not be a burden. And if at the end of 30 days you want me gone, I will leave and never bother you again." Quinn looked at her, this desperate orc woman who had somehow upended his quiet life in the space of 5 minutes. The smart thing would be to refuse, to send her away before her problems became his problems. He had enough to deal with trying to make his farm successful, without adding a fake marriage to an orc refugee into the mix. But he kept thinking about the fear he had seen in her eyes, the desperation in her voice when she had asked him not to question her in the market. He thought about a woman being forced to marry a man who had killed his previous wife, about being given no choice in her own future. Quinn had always had a weakness for lost causes and people in need. It was why he had joined the army in the first place, hoping to make a difference. It was why he always helped his neighbors even when he barely had enough to sustain himself. His mother used to say his heart was too soft for his own good. 30 days, he heard himself say. "You can stay for 30 days. You can sleep in the barn. It is cleaner than it looks, and I have extra blankets. You do not have to work, but I would not say no to help with the harvest. And after 30 days, if you want to leave, I will not stop you." The relief on Makora's face was so profound that Quinn felt his chest tighten again. She took a step forward as though to embrace him, then caught herself and stopped, clearly remembering they were strangers. "Thank you," she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the words. "You do not know what this means to me." "I am starting to get an idea," Quinn said dryly. He picked up the grain sack, immediately regretted it as his knee protested, and gestured toward the farmhouse. "Come on. Let me show you where you will be staying, and then we should probably talk about our story. If people come asking questions, we need to have our details straight." Makora followed him down the dirt path toward his property. The cabin came into view first, small but well-maintained, with a stone chimney and shuttered windows. Beyond it sat the barn, and past that stretched the fields where Quinn had planted wheat, barley, and vegetables. "This is yours?" Makora asked, and there was something wistful in her voice. "It was my father's," Quinn explained. "He died 2 years ago, left it to me. I am still figuring out the farming part, honestly. Turns out killing people and growing food require very different skill sets." "You were a warrior," Makora said. "It was not a question." "For 3 years up on the northern border." Quinn set the grain sack down near the cabin door, grateful to be rid of the weight. "Got injured and discharged, came home to this." "You miss it?" "The fighting?" Quinn considered the question as he limped toward the barn. "Sometimes I miss the sense of purpose, the feeling that what I was doing mattered, but I do not miss the killing. Seen enough blood for one lifetime." He pushed open the barn doors, revealing a space that was indeed cleaner than its weathered exterior suggested. There were 2 stalls for animals he did not own yet, a ladder leading to a loft area where he stored hay, and various tools hanging on the walls. "The loft is dry and warm," Quinn said. "I can bring you blankets and a pillow. There is a well behind the house for water, and you are welcome to use the privy. I am usually up at dawn to work the fields." Makora was looking around the barn with an expression Quinn could not quite read. "This is more than I expected," she said quietly. "More than I deserve from a stranger." "Everyone deserves a safe place to sleep," Quinn said. "Besides, you are my wife now, remember, at least as far as the rest of the world is concerned." The word wife felt strange on his tongue, weighted with implications neither of them had bargained for. Makora seemed to feel it too, because that green flush returned to her cheeks. "We should establish our story," she said, clearly trying to move past the awkward moment. "How we met, how long we have been married, why no one has seen me before." They spent the next hour sitting on hay bales in the barn, working out the details of their fictional relationship. They decided to say they had met 6 months ago, when Makora had been passing through the area as part of a trading caravan. They had fallen in love quickly, a whirlwind romance, and married in secret because they knew their union would be controversial. Makora had been traveling back and forth between her clan and Crossfen, which was why no one had seen her before, but had now decided to stay permanently. It was a thin story, full of holes that anyone who looked too closely would see right through. But it was the best they could do with the limited time they had. As the sun began to set, Quinn showed Makora where everything was around the farm, then retreated to his cabin to make dinner. He had expected to eat alone, it was what he usually did, but Makora knocked on his door just as he was pulling bread from the oven. "I thought we should eat together," she said when he opened the door. "If anyone happens by, it would look strange for us to take our meals separately." It was a practical point, so Quinn invited her in. His cabin was small, just 1 room with a bed in the corner, a table and chairs, a fireplace, and a few shelves for his meager possessions. It felt even smaller with Makora inside, her height and presence making the space seem cramped. They ate in awkward silence at first, neither quite sure what to say to the other. The bread was good, and the soup Quinn had made from vegetables and dried meat was hearty enough, but the atmosphere was strange. Less than 6 hours ago, they had been complete strangers. Now they were sharing a meal in his home, bound together by a lie that could have serious consequences for both of them. "This is good," Makora said finally, gesturing to the soup. "You cook well." "I learned out of necessity," Quinn admitted. "My mother died when I was young and my father was not much for cooking. It was learn or starve." "My mother taught me," Makora said, something sad crossing her face. "She died 3 years ago. After that, there was no one to speak for me, no one to argue against the match with Garn." Quinn wanted to ask more about her mother, about her life in the clan, but something held him back. They had time, 30 days of it, and he did not want to push too hard too fast. "Tell me about your farm," Makora said instead, clearly wanting to change the subject. "What do you grow?" They spent the rest of the meal talking about crops and soil and the challenges of working land alone. Quinn found himself relaxing as they talked, surprised by how much Makora knew about farming. She had worked the communal gardens in her clan, she explained, and had always loved the feel of dirt under her fingernails and the satisfaction of watching things grow. When the meal was finished, Makora helped clean up despite Quinn's protests, then excused herself to the barn. Quinn watched her go from his doorway, her tall figure silhouetted against the darkening sky, and wondered what exactly he had gotten himself into. That night, lying in his bed, Quinn found himself unable to sleep. His mind kept returning to amber eyes and the desperation in Makora's voice. He thought about the scandal that would follow this, and there would be scandal. He had no illusions about that. Crossfen was a small community where everyone knew everyone else's business, and what he had done today would be the talk of the village for months. But when he closed his eyes, he kept seeing the relief on Makora's face when he had agreed to help her, and somehow that made all the complications seem worth it. Morning came too early, as it always did on a farm. Quinn dragged himself out of bed, splashed water on his face from the basin, and headed outside to start his daily chores. He was surprised to find Makora already awake, examining the fence line around his wheat field. "You are up early," he called out as he approached. She turned, and in the soft morning light he was struck again by how striking she was. "I have always been an early riser," she said. "I hope you do not mind, but I notice several posts here are rotting. If you have extra wood, I could replace them today." Quinn blinked. He had been meaning to fix that fence for weeks, but had not gotten around to it. "You do not have to do that." "I told you I would not be a burden," Makora said firmly. "Let me help." They worked together that morning, Quinn showing her where he kept his tools and spare lumber while she assessed the damage and planned the repairs. She moved with confident efficiency, clearly experienced with this kind of work. By midday, she had replaced 3 posts and reinforced 2 others, barely breaking a sweat despite the physical labor. Quinn brought out bread and cheese for lunch, and they sat in the shade of the barn to eat. The awkwardness from the previous night had eased somewhat, replaced by a comfortable companionship born of shared work. "You are good at this," Quinn observed, gesturing to the repaired fence. Makora shrugged. "In my clan, everyone must know how to build and repair. We move our camps seasonally, so we are always constructing new shelters and pens." "What made you choose farming over warrior training?" Quinn asked, genuinely curious. "Most orcs I have encountered were fighters." A shadow passed over Makora's face. "I trained as a warrior," she admitted. "All orcs do. But I never enjoyed the violence. I wanted to create things, not destroy them. My mother understood, but after she died, the clan elders decided I needed to be pushed harder, made tougher. That was when they arranged the match with Garn. They thought a strong warrior would teach me my place." The bitterness in her voice made Quinn's jaw tighten. "That is a terrible reason to force a marriage." Most orc marriages are alliances, Makora explained. Love is seen as a weakness, a distraction from duty to the clan. My mother's marriage was arranged, as was her mother's before her. But my mother and father grew to care for each other, and she wanted better for me. She made me promise that if I ever had the chance to choose my own path, I would take it. She looked up at Quinn, something vulnerable in her expression. So that is what I am doing. Choosing. Quinn felt the weight of that choice, the courage it had taken for her to run. For what it is worth, I think your mother would be proud. Makora's eyes brightened, and she smiled a real smile that showed her small tusks and transformed her entire face. Thank you, she said softly. They returned to work after lunch, falling into an easy rhythm. Quinn focused on weeding the vegetable garden while Makora finished the fence repairs, and then moved on to examining the barn roof, which had been leaking during the last rain. By the time the sun began to set, more had been accomplished than Quinn usually managed in 3 days alone. That night, they shared another meal, this time with less awkwardness and more genuine conversation. Makora asked about Quinn's time as a soldier, and he found himself telling her stories he had not shared with anyone since coming home. She listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and never flinching at the darker parts. In turn, Quinn learned more about her life in the clan, the complex social structures, the honor codes, the constant pressure to prove one's strength. She spoke of it with a mixture of affection and frustration, clearly loving parts of her culture while chafing against its rigid expectations. 3 days passed in this manner. They worked the farm during the day, ate together in the evening, and slowly began to know each other. Quinn found himself looking forward to their conversations, enjoying Makora's dry sense of humor and sharp observations. She had a way of seeing the world that was different from his own, shaped by her experiences, but remarkably open-minded. On the 4th day, their peaceful routine was disrupted by visitors. Quinn was in the wheat field, checking the grain for signs of rust disease, when he heard horses approaching. He straightened, one hand instinctively going to the small knife he kept on his belt. Old soldier habits died hard, and turned to see 3 riders coming up the path to his farm. He recognized them immediately. Marcus Fletcher, the village headman, Father Brennan, the local priest, and Thomas Yarrow, who owned the largest farm in the area. All 3 were respected men in Crossfin, and their presence together could only mean one thing. They had come about Makora. Makora must have heard the horses too, because she emerged from the barn where she had been organizing tools. She moved to stand beside Quinn, her posture relaxed but her eyes alert. Without thinking, Quinn reached out and took her hand, squeezing it once in reassurance. She squeezed back. The 3 men dismounted near the cabin. Marcus Fletcher was a stout man in his 50s with a permanently serious expression. He approached Quinn with the careful manner of someone navigating a diplomatic minefield. "Quinn," Marcus said, nodding in greeting. His eyes flicked to Makora, widened slightly, then returned to Quinn. "We heard some rather surprising news from the market the other day. Thought we should come out and speak with you directly. Marcus, Father Brennan, Thomas," Quinn kept his voice polite but firm. "What can I do for you?" Father Brennan stepped forward. He was younger than Marcus, probably in his early 40s, with kind eyes but a perpetually worried expression. "Quinn, my boy, we are concerned about you. There are rumors spreading through the village that you have taken an orc as a wife. Please tell us this is some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Quinn said evenly. "This is Makora. She is my wife." Thomas Yarrow made a disapproving noise in his throat. He was a tall, weathered man who had never much liked Quinn, seeing him as a failed farmer squatting on good land. "This is madness, Davenport. Humans do not marry orcs. It is unnatural. Quinn felt Makora tense beside him, but her expression remained neutral. He squeezed her hand again. "With respect, Thomas, who I choose to marry is my own business," Quinn said, keeping his tone level despite the anger rising in his chest. "It becomes the village's business when it brings trouble to our doors," Marcus said, his diplomatic mask slipping slightly. "Orcs and humans have been enemies for generations. What do you think will happen if her clan comes looking for her? What if they decide to raid Crossfen in retaliation?" "Makora's clan has no interest in raiding human settlements," Quinn said, "and she came here of her own free will. She is not a prisoner or a trophy. She is a person who made a choice. A choice to ensnare a good Christian man with whatever dark magics or kind practices," Thomas spat. "Everyone knows orcs are savages and tricksters. That was too much." Quinn took a step forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "You will not speak about my wife that way, not on my land, not anywhere." The three men exchanged glances. Father Brennan cleared his throat. "Quinn, please understand we are coming from a place of concern. The church has very clear teachings about the sanctity of marriage, and I am afraid a union between a human and an orc does not qualify. I cannot in good conscience recognize this marriage." "Then it is fortunate we were not asking for your blessing." Makora spoke for the first time, her voice calm and clear. "We are married under orc law, which recognizes the choice of the individuals involved. We do not need your church's approval." Father Brennan looked like he had bitten into something bitter. "Young woman, you do not understand the gravity of what you have done. You have led this man astray, tempted him away from proper Christian society." "I have done nothing of the sort," Makora interrupted, her eyes flashing. "Quinn made his own choice, just as I made mine. We have harmed no one and broken no laws. If your God is as loving as you claim, perhaps he would celebrate two people finding happiness together rather than condemning them for the color of their skin." The silence that followed was thunderous. Quinn wanted to cheer for the way Makora had stood her ground, but he could see the situation was escalating dangerously. Marcus held up a hand before Father Brennan could respond. "We are not here to debate theology," he said firmly. "We are here because your presence, Makora, has created unrest in Crossfen. People are frightened. They worry about what your clan might do, or what other orcs might think if they learn a human has married one of their females. We need assurances that you will not bring danger to our community." "I can assure you that I have no intention of bringing harm to anyone," Makora said, her voice softening slightly. "I left my clan to escape a forced marriage. I want nothing more than to live peacefully and be left alone. Is that really so threatening to you?" Thomas opened his mouth, clearly ready to argue further, but Marcus shot him a quelling look. The headman studied Makora for a long moment, and Quinn could see him reassessing, possibly recognizing the sincerity in her words. 30 days, Marcus said finally. "We will give you 30 days to prove you can live here without incident. If there is any trouble, any sign that your presence is endangering Crossfen, you will have to leave. Is that understood?" Quinn wanted to argue, to tell them they had no right to put conditions on where Makora could live. But he also understood the position Marcus was in, trying to balance the safety of the village against basic human decency. "Understood," Quinn said before Makora could respond. 30 days. The three men mounted their horses and rode away, Thomas still glaring back at them with undisguised hostility. Quinn and Makora stood together, watching until they disappeared from sight. 30 days, Makora said softly. "That is how long I have anyway." "They had no right to threaten you like that," Quinn said, anger still simmering in his gut. "They are frightened," Makora said with surprising understanding. "Fear makes people cruel. I know that better than most." They returned to work, but the visit had cast a shadow over the day. Quinn could not stop thinking about Father Brennan's condemnation, about Thomas's disgust, about Marcus's barely concealed concern that Makora was a threat. It made him realize how difficult the next 30 days were going to be. That night, as they ate dinner, Makora was quieter than usual. Quinn could see her wrestling with something, her food barely touched. "What is wrong?" he asked finally. Makora looked up at him, conflict clear in her amber eyes. "I should leave," she said quietly. "This was selfish of me. I am bringing trouble to you, damaging your standing in the community. You have been nothing but kind to me, and I am repaying that kindness by making you an outcast." "You are not making me anything," Quinn said firmly. "I made my own choice, remember, and I do not regret it. But your village is going to have to learn to be more tolerant," Quinn interrupted. "Look, I am not going to pretend this is easy or that there will not be consequences. But you came to me desperate and afraid, and I am not the kind of person who turns away someone in need, especially not because of what other people think." "Why?" Makora asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. Why risk so much for a stranger, for an orc? Quinn thought about how to answer that. The truth was complicated, a tangle of his own sense of justice, his loneliness, and something else he was not quite ready to name. In the few days she had been here, Makora had become more than just a person he was helping. She had become a friend, a companion whose presence made his small cabin feel less empty and his days less monotonous. "Because everyone deserves a choice," he said finally. "And because I do not think the circumstances of someone's birth should determine their worth. I fought alongside good men and against good men, and I killed orcs and orcs killed my friends, and through it all, I kept wondering if any of it mattered. If there was really any difference between us except the color of our skin and which side of the border we were born on." He met her eyes. "You asked if I missed my time as a soldier. The truth is I came home because I was tired of fighting someone else's war. This helping you feels like finally doing something that actually matters." Makora stared at him, and in the flickering firelight, her eyes seemed to shine with unshed tears. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before," she whispered. "Then you have been talking to the wrong people," Quinn said gently. She laughed, a watery sound that broke the tension. "Perhaps I have." They finished their meal in comfortable silence, and when Makora left for the barn that night, she paused at the door and turned back. "Thank you, Quinn," she said, "for all of this, for being exactly who you are." "Sleep well, Makora," Quinn replied and meant it. The next morning, Quinn woke to the sound of voices outside. He grabbed his shirt and hurried out to find Makora talking with a woman he recognized as Sarah Pine, who lived on a nearby farm with her husband and 3 children. "Sarah," Quinn said, surprised, "is everything all right?" Sarah turned to him, and he was relieved to see she looked more curious than hostile. "Morning, Quinn. I brought some eggs and butter to welcome your wife to the area. Figured it was the neighborly thing to do." Quinn felt his eyebrows climb toward his hairline. "That is very kind of you." Sarah shrugged. "My grandmother was from the eastern provinces, and people around here treated her like dirt for years because she looked different and talked different. I remember what that was like. Figured maybe I could be the change I wanted to see back then." She turned to Makora. "You are welcome to visit any time. My children would probably love to meet you. They have never seen an orc before, and I would rather they learn early that different does not mean dangerous." Makora looked stunned. "Thank you," she managed. "That is incredibly kind." Sarah left shortly after, and Quinn and Makora stood staring at the basket of eggs and the wrapped butter she had left. "See," Quinn said, nudging Makora gently. "Not everyone in Crossfen is closed-minded. Over the next week, they fell into a deeper routine. Makora proved invaluable around the farm, her strength and tireless work ethic accomplishing tasks Quinn had been putting off for months. She repaired the barn roof, cleared rocks from the north field, and even helped him harvest the first of his wheat. In the evenings, they would sit outside the cabin and talk, sharing stories about their lives and dreams for the future. Quinn found himself noticing small things about her. The way she hummed while she worked, the careful gentleness with which she handled fragile things despite her strength, the way her tusks caught the light when she smiled. He noticed how her presence made the farm feel less lonely, made him look forward to each new day. He realized with a start one evening, beginning to care for her, not just as someone he was helping, but as a person he genuinely enjoyed being around. Someone he was attracted to in ways he had not expected. The realization should have been alarming. This was supposed to be temporary, a 30-day arrangement to help her escape danger. But somewhere along the way, the lines had blurred, and Quinn was not entirely sure he wanted them to become clear again. Makora seemed to be experiencing something similar. He would catch her watching him sometimes with an expression that made his heart race, only for her to quickly look away when their eyes met. The casual touches a hand on the arm, shoulders bumping as they worked side by side, began to linger longer than strictly necessary. The air between them grew charged with unspoken possibilities. 2 weeks into their arrangement, everything changed. Quinn was in the wheat field, bundling the harvested grain, when he heard Makora shout his name. The alarm in her voice had him running despite his bad knee, arriving at the front of the property to find her standing between the farmhouse and 3 orc warriors mounted on massive war horses. The lead warrior was enormous, even by orc standards, with arms like tree trunks and a face marked by a vicious scar running from his forehead to his jaw. He was looking at Makora with an expression of cold fury. "Makora," the warrior growled, his voice like grinding stone, "you will come with us." "Now." "I am not going anywhere, Garn," Makora said, her voice steady despite the fear Quinn could see in the tension of her shoulders. "I told you I would not marry you." So this was Garn, the warrior she had run from. Quinn moved to stand beside Makora, very aware that he was unarmed except for his harvesting knife, and that he was facing 3 trained orc warriors who could probably kill him without breaking a sweat. "Who is this?" Garn demanded, his eyes finally settling on Quinn. "A pet human." "My husband," Makora said firmly. "As I told the clan elders I would present before the moon turned, here he stands." Garn's laugh was a harsh bark. "You married this weak human who can barely walk straight. You dishonor yourself and your clan, Makora." Quinn felt his jaw tighten, but before he could speak, Makora took a step forward. "There is no dishonor in choosing kindness over cruelty, companionship over violence," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "Quinn has shown me more respect and care in 2 weeks than you showed your last wife in 2 years of marriage. I would rather stand beside him than serve you for even a single day." The 2 other warriors exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. But Garn's face had gone dark with rage. "You think you can just walk away from your obligations," he snarled. "The elders agreed to your marriage to me. You belong to the clan." "I belong to myself," Makora shot back, "and I choose to stay here." Garn dismounted in one smooth motion, his hand going to the massive axe strapped to his back. "Then I challenge your claim. If this human is truly your husband, let him defend his marriage right. Let him face me in combat, and we will see if he is worthy of an orc wife." Quinn's blood went cold. He had been a decent fighter in his time, but he was no match for an orc warrior, especially not with his bad knee. This was a death sentence wrapped in the language of honor. "No," Makora said immediately. "I will not let you kill him to satisfy your pride." "Then come with me," Garn said, his voice dropping to something almost reasonable. "Come back to the clan, marry me, and I will let your human live. Refuse, and I will kill him here and now and drag you back anyway. Choose." Quinn could see the desperation in Makora's eyes, the terrible calculation she was making. She was going to agree to go with Garn to save Quinn's life. He could not let that happen. "I accept your challenge," Quinn said, his voice clear and steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Quinn, no," Makora started, but he cut her off. "I am your husband, remember." He met her eyes, trying to convey everything he was feeling in that moment. "Let me do this." Garn grinned, showing all his teeth. "So be it. We fight until one of us yields or dies. If I win, Makora returns with me. If you somehow win, I will leave and tell the clan her marriage is legitimate." The two other warriors dismounted to serve as witnesses. One of them, a female with graying hair and thoughtful eyes, approached Makora. "This is foolish," she said quietly. "Garn will kill him. You know this." "I know," Makora whispered, her eyes never leaving Quinn. Quinn removed his shirt, checking his footing on the packed earth. His knee was already aching, and he had not been in a real fight since before his injury. This was going to be ugly and probably short. Garn drew his axe, a weapon that was nearly as tall as Quinn and probably weighed more. He swung it experimentally, the blade cutting through the air with a whistle that promised terrible damage. Quinn drew his small harvesting knife, laughably inadequate, and settled into a fighting stance he had learned years ago in a training yard far from here. "Any time you want to yield, human," Garn said with mock generosity. "Not happening," Quinn replied. Garn charged. What followed was less a fight than a desperate attempt to survive. Garn swung his axe in great arcs that would have cleaved Quinn in half if they had connected. Quinn dodged and ducked, using his smaller size to his advantage, but his knee betrayed him on the third dodge and he went down hard. The axe came down. Quinn rolled, felt the blade pass so close to his head that it caught some of his hair. He lashed out with his knife, caught Garn's leg, drew blood. It was a superficial cut, barely an annoyance to the massive warrior, but it proved Quinn was not going to just lie down and die. Garn kicked him in the ribs and Quinn felt something crack. Pain exploded through his chest, making it hard to breathe. He tried to stand, but Garn was already there, one massive hand closing around his throat and lifting him off the ground. "Pathetic," Garn spat, squeezing. "This is what you chose over me, Makora." This weakling. Black spots danced in Quinn's vision. He could hear Makora screaming, could hear the two other warriors shouting something, but it all seemed distant and unimportant compared to the fact that he could not breathe and was definitely going to die. Then something changed. Garn's eyes widened, and he made a strange gurgling sound. His grip on Quinn's throat loosened, and Quinn fell to the ground, gasping for air. Through his watering eyes, Quinn saw Makora standing behind Garn, her hand wrapped around the hilt of a knife she had driven into the warrior's back. Not deeply enough to kill, but enough to cause serious pain and shock. Garn staggered, reaching back to grab at the blade. Makora twisted it once, viciously, then yanked it free and stepped back, the bloody knife held ready. "Touch him again," she said, her voice deadly calm, "and the next one goes through your spine." The clearing had gone silent. The two witnessing warriors stared at Makora with expressions of shock and something that might have been respect. Garn turned to face her, blood staining his back, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. "You dare," he growled. You violate every rule of honorable combat. There is no honor in what you are doing, Makora interrupted. You challenged a man you knew could not defeat you, not to test his worth, but to humiliate him, to humiliate me. I am done playing by rules designed to keep me powerless. She raised the knife higher. Leave my land, leave my husband, and tell the clan elders that I have made my choice. For a long moment, Quinn thought Garn was going to attack anyway, rules be damned. But the female warrior stepped forward, placing herself between Garn and Makora. She has spoken her choice, the female warrior said. Under clan law, she has the right to defend her chosen mate from unfair challenge. The trial by combat is invalid. Zara, Garn started, but Zara cut him off with a sharp gesture. You were going to kill him, Garn, we all knew it. This was not about honor, it was about your wounded pride. Zara turned to Makora. I will tell the elders what happened here. They may not like it, but they will accept your marriage. You are free of obligation to the clan. Makora's hand trembled, but she kept the knife raised. Thank you, Zara. Garn looked between Makora and the two other warriors, clearly outnumbered. With a roar of frustration, he mounted his horse and rode away without another word. The male warrior followed quickly, but Zara lingered for a moment. Your mother would be proud, she said softly to Makora. She always wanted you to be strong enough to choose your own path. It seems you are. Then she too mounted and rode away, leaving Quinn and Makora alone. The moment the orcs were out of sight, Makora dropped the knife and rushed to Quinn's side. How badly are you hurt? Can you breathe? I heard something crack. Broken rib, I think, Quinn wheezed, trying to sit up and immediately regretting it. Maybe two, but I am alive, which was not guaranteed a few minutes ago. Makora's face crumpled. I am so sorry. I should never have let you accept that challenge. I should have just gone with him and let him win. Quinn managed a pained smile. Not a chance. Although I have to say, your timing with that knife was impeccable. I could not just stand there and watch him kill you, Makora said, tears streaming down her face. I realized I would rather face exile and dishonor from my clan than lose you. That what I feel for you is worth any consequence. Quinn reached up with his good hand and wiped at her tears. What do you feel for me, Makora? She laughed through her tears, the sound somewhere between joy and despair. Is it not obvious? I have fallen in love with you, Quinn Davenport. Somewhere between fixing your fence and arguing about the proper way to bundle wheat, I stopped pretending this marriage was fake and started wishing it were real. Quinn's heart felt like it might burst despite the pain in his ribs. Good, he said. Because I have been feeling the same way and wondering if I was losing my mind. Makora stared at him, hope and disbelief warring on her face. You love me. I love you, Quinn confirmed, which is inconvenient timing considering I can barely move, but yes, absolutely yes. She kissed him then, gentle and careful of his injuries, and Quinn thought that despite the pain and the danger and the impossibility of it all, this was exactly where he wanted to be. The next few days were difficult. Quinn's ribs needed time to heal, which meant he could not do much around the farm. Makora refused to let him even try, taking on all the physical work herself while also nursing him back to health. She moved her belongings from the barn into the cabin, sleeping on the floor beside his bed so she could help him during the night when the pain was worst. Sarah Pine visited several times, bringing food and checking on Quinn's recovery. She seemed unsurprised by the news that Makora was now living in the cabin proper, simply nodding as though it was the natural progression of things. My husband wants to come by and thank Makora, Sarah said on her third visit. Apparently word got around about how she fought off 3 orc warriors to protect you. Some of the men are impressed, think maybe having an orc around could be useful if there is ever trouble. She fought off one orc warrior, Quinn corrected. The other two were actually quite reasonable. Details, Sarah waved a hand dismissively. The point is people are starting to come around. You two might actually make this work. As Quinn healed, he and Makora talked about what came next. The 30 days were nearly up, both the deadline from the clan and from Marcus Fletcher, and they needed to make decisions about their future. "I want to stay," Makora said one evening as they sat together on the cabin's small porch, watching the sun set over the wheat fields. "Not because I am running from something, but because I am choosing to be here, with you, if you will have me." "If I will have you," Quinn laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his still healing ribs. "Makora, these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. I want nothing more than for you to stay, to make this marriage real in every sense." "Even knowing it will be difficult," Makora asked, "that there will always be people who look down on us, who see our love as something wrong or unnatural." "Let them look," Quinn said firmly. "I would rather face a lifetime of narrow-minded disapproval with you than a lifetime of acceptance without you." Makora leaned her head against his shoulder, careful not to jostle his ribs. "We will need to make it official somehow, if we are going to do this properly." Quinn thought about Father Brennan's refusal to recognize their marriage, about the way the church saw their union as an abomination. Then he thought about what Makora had said to the priest, that they did not need anyone's blessing but their own. "Tomorrow," he said, "when I can move without feeling like I am being stabbed, we will have our own ceremony, just the two of us. We will speak our vows to each other and mean them, and that will be enough." The next day dawned clear and beautiful. Quinn's ribs were still tender, but he could move without too much pain. He dressed in his best clothes, a simple shirt and pants that had belonged to his father, while Makora wore a dress that Sarah had brought by, a deep blue that brought out the color in her eyes. They walked together to the creek that ran through Quinn's property, to a spot where willows hung over the water and wildflowers grew in profusion. It was peaceful and private, a place that felt separate from the rest of the world. Quinn took Makora's hands in his, marveling at how perfectly they fit together despite the difference in size and color. "I do not have a fancy speech prepared," he admitted, "but I want you to know that I choose you, Makora. I choose you not because you needed saving or because circumstances pushed us together, but because you have become the most important person in my life. You are strong and kind and brave, and I want to spend every day I have left making you as happy as you have made me. I promise to be your partner, your protector, and your friend. I promise to honor your choices and support your dreams, and I promise to love you with everything I have, for as long as we both live." Makora's eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling. "I choose you too, Quinn. I choose your kindness and your stubborn insistence on doing the right thing even when it is hard. I choose the way you see people for who they are rather than what they are. I choose the home we are building together and the future we will share. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to work this land with you and defend it if necessary. I promise to honor you as my husband in truth, not just in words, and I promise to love you with my whole heart from this day until my last." There was no priest to officiate, no witnesses to observe, no rings to exchange. But when Quinn pulled Makora close and kissed her, sealing their promises to each other, it felt more real and binding than any ceremony could have been. They spent the rest of the day together, walking the boundaries of the farm and talking about their plans. They would expand the fields next spring, Makora suggested, and perhaps get some chickens and a cow. Quinn wanted to rebuild the barn properly, maybe add another room to the cabin eventually. They talked about the future with an ease that came from knowing they would face it together. That evening, as promised, Marcus Fletcher returned with Father Brennan and Thomas Yarrow. They rode up to the farmhouse looking wary, clearly expecting some kind of confrontation. Quinn and Makora met them together, standing side by side on the porch of their home. "The 30 days are up," Marcus announced. "We need to know if there has been any trouble, any indication that your presence has endangered Crossfen." "No trouble," Quinn said evenly. "Unless you count repairing fences and harvesting wheat as dangerous activities." "We heard there was an incident with orc warriors," Father Brennan said, his expression troubled. "That there was violence." "There was a confrontation," Makora acknowledged. "Members of my former clan came to contest my marriage. The matter has been resolved. The clan has accepted our union and we will not be bothered again." "You are certain of this?" Marcus asked, studying her face. "I am certain," Makora said firmly. "I swear it on my mother's memory." The three men exchanged glances. Thomas still looked disapproving, but even he seemed to have lost some of his earlier hostility. "Very well," Marcus said finally. "You have kept your word. There has been no trouble for Crossfen. I see no reason to force you to leave." He paused, then added more gently, "I cannot say everyone in the village will welcome you, but you have earned the right to stay." "That is all we ask," Quinn said. "The right to live our lives in peace." After the men left, Quinn and Makora stood together watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The ordeal was over. They had survived the 30 days, convinced the clan to leave them alone, and earned however grudgingly acceptance from the village. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. "No regrets?" Quinn asked, pulling Makora closer. She turned to look at him, her amber eyes reflecting the starlight. "Only that I did not find you sooner. Only that we wasted even a moment pretending this was anything other than what it is." "And what is it?" Quinn asked, even though he knew the answer. "Love," Makora said simply. "True and real and worth every risk we took to claim it." Quinn kissed her again, longer and deeper than before, and felt her smile against his lips. Behind them, the cabin waited with warm firelight spilling from the windows. The fields they would work together stretched out in the darkness. The life they would build lay before them, full of challenges and joy in equal measure. As autumn deepened and gave way to winter, Quinn and Makora settled into their life together. The awkwardness of those first days had long since faded, replaced by the comfortable intimacy of two people who had chosen each other fully and without reservation. They worked the farm together, preparing it for the cold months ahead. Makora proved to be an excellent hunter, bringing home deer and wild turkeys that they smoked and preserved for the winter. Quinn taught her to read and write during the long evenings, and she taught him some of the orc language in return, laughing at his pronunciation. Sarah Pine became a regular visitor, often bringing her children to play around the farm. The youngest, a girl of about 6, became particularly attached to Makora, following her around and asking endless questions about orc culture. Other neighbors began to stop by as well, some out of genuine friendliness, others out of curiosity, but all leaving convinced that the unusual couple posed no threat. The prejudice did not disappear entirely. There were still those in Crossfen who refused to acknowledge Makora's presence, who crossed the street when they saw her coming, or made the sign against evil when she passed. Quinn found himself in more than one heated argument defending his wife's honor, and twice he had to physically intervene when young men from the village decided to test themselves against the orc woman. But Makora handled it all with a grace that Quinn found humbling. She refused to rise to provocations, responded to insults with dignity, and slowly, patiently, won over the skeptics through her actions rather than her words. When old Widow Harrow fell ill and had no one to help her, Makora showed up at her door with firewood and stayed to cook and clean until the woman recovered. When a fire threatened the yarrow farm, Makora was the first one there to help fight the flames, working tirelessly through the night. Acts of kindness and service that spoke louder than any argument could. By the time winter truly settled in, even Thomas Yarrow had grudgingly admitted that perhaps having an orc in the community was not the disaster he had predicted. He still did not approve of the marriage, but he stopped actively working against them, which was progress of a sort. On the longest night of the year, Quinn and Makora lay together in their bed, the fire burning low in the hearth and snow falling softly outside the windows. They had spent the evening preparing a small feast to celebrate both the human tradition of the winter solstice and the orc tradition of honoring one's ancestors on the darkest night. "You ever miss it?" Quinn asked quietly. "Your clan, your people, the life you had before?" Makora was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "I miss some things," she admitted. "I miss my mother, though that has nothing to do with leaving the clan. I miss some of the traditions, the songs we would sing, the stories the elders would tell. But I do not miss the constant pressure to be something I was not, the violence that was expected and celebrated, the lack of choice in my own future." She turned to face him, her hand coming up to cup his cheek. "I do not miss who I was before I met you." That version of Makora was surviving, not living. "You gave me the chance to truly be myself." "You gave yourself that chance," Quinn corrected gently. "I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." "No," Makora said firmly, "do not diminish what you did. You could have turned me away. You could have refused to help, could have listened to your priest and your neighbors. But you chose compassion over fear, and that choice saved my life. It gave me a future I never dared to dream of." Quinn pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her herbs and wood smoke and something indefinably her. "You saved me too," he admitted. "I was so lonely before you came, going through the motions of living but not really feeling anything. You brought color back into my world, gave me a reason to look forward to each day." They made love that night with a tenderness that still carried echoes of the passion that had been building between them since the moment their hands first touched in the marketplace. Afterward, tangled together in the warmth of their bed, Quinn found himself thinking about that day with a sense of wonder. How strange that a moment of desperation and improvisation had led to the deepest happiness he had ever known. "Do you remember," he said drowsily, "when you first called me husband in the market? I thought you were absolutely mad." Makora laughed softly. "I was terrified you would refuse, that you would push me away or call for help. But there was something about you, the way you looked at people with kindness rather than suspicion. I knew if anyone would help me, it would be you. I still do not know if that says more about my kindness or my foolishness," Quinn said with a smile. "Perhaps both," Makora teased. "But I am grateful for it either way." Winter passed slowly, as winters always did on the frontier. There were hard days when food ran low, and the cold seemed to seep into their very bones. There were days when Quinn's old injury ached so badly he could barely walk, and days when Makora grew melancholy thinking of her mother and the life she had left behind. But there were also beautiful days. Days when the sun turned the snow-covered fields into a glittering wonderland. Days when they would sit by the fire and tell each other stories, or play games with carved wooden pieces Quinn had made. Days when they would simply be together, content in each other's company, needing nothing more than the quiet joy of shared existence. Spring came eventually, as it always did. The snow melted, the creek swelled with runoff, and the first green shoots pushed up through the thawing earth. Quinn and Makora set to work preparing the fields for planting, their partnership now so seamless that they often knew what the other needed without speaking. They expanded the farm as they had discussed, breaking new ground and planting a more diverse array of crops. Makora built a chicken coop and convinced Quinn to let her bring home a cow she had won in a wager with a traveling merchant. The cow, named Blossom by mutual agreement, provided milk and made their small farm feel more prosperous. More visitors came as the weather improved. Sarah brought her husband and children for dinner, and the evening was filled with laughter and good conversation. Several other families followed, curious to meet the infamous orc wife and surprised to find her welcoming and kind. Slowly, painfully slowly, Makora was being woven into the social fabric of Crossfen. There were setbacks, too. A merchant passing through spread rumors that Makora was part of a larger orc plot to infiltrate human settlements. A group of young men from a neighboring village came looking for trouble and had to be driven off. Father Brennan continued to preach about the sanctity of proper Christian marriage, though he stopped short of naming Quinn and Makora directly. But for every setback, there was a small victory. Marcus Fletcher invited them to a village gathering to discuss plans for a new well. Thomas Yarrow asked for Makora's help moving heavy equipment, acknowledging her strength with grudging respect. Widow Harrow began leaving small gifts at their door, jars of preserves, fresh bread, little tokens of appreciation for the care Makora had shown her. One morning in late spring, Quinn woke to find Makora standing at the window, her hand resting on her stomach, a peculiar expression on her face. "What is wrong?" he asked, immediately alert to any sign of trouble. She turned to him and he saw that she was smiling, though her eyes were bright with tears. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is exactly right. Quinn, I think I am with child." The world seemed to stop turning. Quinn sat frozen in bed, trying to process what she had just said. A child. Their child. The product of their love, carrying both their bloodlines in a way that was supposed to be impossible. "Are you certain?" he finally managed to ask. "As certain as I can be," Makora said, moving to sit beside him on the bed. "I have missed my moon blood twice now, and I have been feeling strange in the mornings. And this." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I can feel something changing. It is too early to be sure, but I think we are going to have a baby." Joy flooded through Quinn, so intense it was almost painful. He pulled Makora into his arms, holding her as tightly as he dared, feeling her shake with laughter or tears or both. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby. How is that even possible? I thought humans and orcs could not." "It is rare," Makora admitted, "but not impossible. My mother told me stories of such unions, though they were always spoken of as tragedies because the lovers were forced apart before the child could be born. But this—" She pulled back to look at him, her face radiant. "This is no tragedy. This is a miracle." They told no one at first, wanting to keep the precious secret to themselves until they were certain. But as the weeks passed and Makora's condition became undeniable, they knew they needed to prepare for the reactions their news would bring. Sarah was the first person they told, and her response was immediate and enthusiastic. "A baby! That is wonderful. You will make excellent parents." Then her expression grew more serious. "But you know there will be talk. People will not know what to make of a child who is both human and orc." "Let them talk," Quinn said firmly. "This child will be loved and wanted, and that is all that matters." Word spread quickly, as it always did in a small community. The reactions were mixed. Some people were genuinely happy for them, seeing the baby as proof that love could truly bridge any divide. Others were horrified, calling the child an abomination and predicting all manner of disasters. Father Brennan came to call, his face grave with concern. Quinn, Makora, I must speak with you about the child you carry. They invited him in, though Quinn's jaw was tight with tension. Whatever the priest had to say, Quinn was prepared to defend his family. I have been praying on this matter, Father Brennan began, and I must tell you that the Church has serious concerns about a child born of a union between human and orc. There are questions about the child's soul, about whether it can be baptized, about its place in God's plan. With respect, Father, Makora said, her voice carefully controlled, your church refused to recognize our marriage from the start. I do not see why we should care about its opinions regarding our child. Because the child will have to live in this world, Father Brennan said, not unkindly. And the world can be cruel to those who do not fit neatly into its categories. I am not saying this to hurt you, but to prepare you for the challenges you will face. Quinn found himself unexpectedly moved by the priest's genuine concern, even if he disagreed with its premise. Thank you for your worry, Father. But our child will be raised to be strong and kind and proud of both parts of their heritage. They will know they are loved, and that will have to be enough. Father Brennan sighed but nodded. Then I will pray for you and for the child. That is all I can offer. After he left, Makora turned to Quinn with troubled eyes. He is not wrong about the challenges. Our child will be neither fully human nor fully orc. They will face prejudice from both sides, will always be seen as other. Then we will teach them that being different is not the same as being less, Quinn said. We will give them the tools to be proud of who they are, to stand up for themselves, to know that their worth is not determined by what other people think. Makora's hand went to her growing belly. They will be so loved, she said softly, by us and by the community we are building. Sarah and her children, Widow Harrow, even Marcus Fletcher in his way, they will have people who see them for who they are. Summer ripened around them as Makora's pregnancy progressed. She remained healthy and strong, continuing to work the farm until Quinn finally convinced her to take it easier. They transformed a corner of the cabin into a nursery, building a cradle from wood Quinn had been saving and sewing blankets from fabric Sarah helped them acquire. Other gifts began to arrive. Widow Harrow brought tiny clothes she had knitted herself. Sarah organized a gathering of the village women, and though not all of them came, those who did brought practical items, diapers and rattles, and advice about childbirth. Even Thomas Yarrow grudgingly contributed a goat, saying gruffly that every child deserved fresh milk. The baby came on a warm night in late summer, after a labor that lasted from sunset to dawn. Sarah attended the birth, having delivered several children in the community, and Makora bore the pain with a stoic determination that filled Quinn with awe and terror in equal measure. When the baby finally entered the world, announcing her presence with a lusty cry, Quinn felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. She was perfect, a beautiful blend of both her parents, with green-tinted skin lighter than Makora's, tiny nubs where tusks would eventually grow, and Quinn's blue eyes staring up at him with unfocused curiosity. A daughter, Sarah announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped infant in Makora's arms. Congratulations. Makora looked down at their baby with such pure love that Quinn had to wipe tears from his own eyes. She is beautiful, Makora whispered. She is perfect. What will you name her? Sarah asked. Quinn and Makora had discussed this many times during the pregnancy. They wanted a name that honored both their cultures, something that would remind their daughter she was a bridge between two worlds. Arya, Quinn said. Arya Davenport, Makora smiled. Arya, yes, it is perfect. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and joy. Quinn had thought he understood love before had felt it for his parents, for his friends who had died in the war, for Makora herself. But the love he felt for his daughter was something entirely new, primal and protective, and all-consuming. He watched Makora cradle their baby and marveled at how natural she looked, how instinctively she seemed to know what Arya needed. He took his own turns walking the floor when Arya fussed, singing her the songs his mother had once sung to him, feeling his heart break and heal with every tiny coo and cry. Sarah brought her children to meet Arya, and the older woman's eyes grew misty as she watched them gently touch the baby's tiny hands. "You have created something beautiful," she told Quinn and Makora. "Not just a child, but hope. You are showing this community that our differences are not something to fear." Not everyone felt that way. There were still those who refused to accept Arya, who saw her as proof of moral corruption or a dangerous blurring of natural boundaries. But Quinn found he cared less about those opinions than he had expected. His world had narrowed to the people who mattered: his wife, his daughter, and the friends who had proven themselves worthy of the name. As Arya grew, it became clear she was going to be remarkable. By 3 months, she was already showing signs of the strength inherited from her mother, gripping fingers with surprising force. But she also had Quinn's curiosity, her blue eyes tracking everything around her with intense interest. Marcus Fletcher came to visit when Arya was 4 months old, asking to see the child who had caused so much discussion in Crossfen. Quinn invited him in cautiously, protective instincts on high alert, but the headman's expression softened when he saw the baby. "She has your eyes, Quinn," Marcus observed, "and your mother's chin, if I remember correctly." "And her mother's strength and stubbornness," Quinn added with a smile. Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching Arya wave her small fists in the air. "I want to apologize," he said finally, "for the way I handled your situation when Makora first arrived. I let fear guide my decisions rather than compassion. You two have proven that love is stronger than prejudice, and your daughter," he gestured to Arya, "she represents the possibility of a better future. One where humans and orcs see each other as people first." "That is all we have ever wanted," Makora said softly, "to be seen as people, to be allowed to love and live in peace." "You have earned that right," Marcus said. "And I will do my best to help ensure Arya grows up in a community that values her for who she is, not what she is." After Marcus left, Quinn held his daughter close, breathing in her sweet baby scent and feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. They had fought so hard for this, for the right to be together, to build a family, to exist without apology. "You think she will understand someday?" Quinn asked Makora. "How much her very existence means, how she is proof that love can overcome anything." "She will know she is loved," Makora said, coming to stand beside them and wrapping her arms around both Quinn and Arya. "And she will grow up seeing her parents work hard and treat others with kindness and stand up for what is right. That is the best legacy we can give her." Autumn came again, marking the passage of a full year since Makora had first appeared in that marketplace and called Quinn husband. So much had changed since that day. They had gone from strangers to partners to parents. They had built a life together from nothing, had faced down prejudice and violence and doubt, and had emerged stronger for it. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Arya sleeping peacefully in her cradle beside them, Quinn found himself reflecting on the strange twists of fate that had brought them here. "I never thanked you properly," he said to Makora. She looked at him in surprise. "For what?" "For choosing me. For seeing something in a limping farmer that made you think I might help you. For being brave enough to walk up to a stranger and call him husband." Makora laughed softly. "I should be thanking you. You had every reason to walk away, to let me face my problems alone. But you did not. You chose kindness when you could have chosen safety. We chose each other, Quinn said, taking her hand. And I would make that choice again, every single time, no matter what it cost. As would I, Makora agreed, squeezing his fingers. Every single time. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. The farm stretched out around them, their land, their home, their future. There would be more challenges ahead, Quinn knew. Arya would grow up facing questions about her identity, would have to navigate a world not quite ready for what she represented. There would be people who would never accept them, would always see their family as wrong or unnatural. But there would also be love. So much love. Love between husband and wife, between parents and child. Love from friends like Sarah who had proven themselves true. Love from a community slowly learning to open its heart to difference. Love that had started with a desperate gamble in a crowded marketplace and had grown into something real and lasting and beautiful. Quinn thought about that moment, often the shock of hearing a stranger call him husband, the choice he had made to play along rather than refuse. It had seemed like such a small thing at the time, barely a conscious decision, but it had changed the entire trajectory of his life. You ever wonder what would have happened if I had refused you that day? Quinn asked. Makora was quiet for a moment, considering. I would have found another way, she said finally. I was desperate enough to try anything, but I do not think it would have ended as well. You were the right person, Quinn, the only person who could have helped me and who I could have come to love so completely. Destiny, Quinn teased gently. Choice, Makora corrected. You chose to help. I chose to trust. We kept choosing each other every single day until those choices built something lasting. As the stars emerged overhead, Quinn felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. His life had not turned out the way he had expected. He had thought he would be a soldier forever, or a lonely farmer struggling to make ends meet. He had never imagined a wife who was stronger than him, a daughter who carried two legacies, a love that defied every convention he had been raised to believe in. But this unexpected life was better than anything he could have planned. It was richer and stranger and more beautiful than his wildest dreams. All because one desperate orc woman had looked at a marketplace full of strangers and chosen him. All because he had chosen to say yes. Arya stirred in her sleep, making a small sound of contentment. Quinn reached down to adjust her blanket, his heart swelling with love for this tiny person who carried such profound significance. She was proof that different worlds could merge, that love was stronger than prejudice, that the future did not have to repeat the mistakes of the past. I love you, Quinn said to Makora, the words simple but weighted with everything he felt. I love you too, Makora replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. Thank you for being my husband, in truth, not just in words. Always, Quinn promised. From that day in the marketplace until my last breath and whatever comes after. Always. They stayed on the porch until the night grew cold, watching the stars wheel overhead and dreaming of the future they would build together. A future full of possibility and challenge, of joy and sorrow, of the million small moments that made up a life. A future that had started with an unexpected declaration and had blossomed into a love story for the ages. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low. In the fields, their crops stood ready for harvest. In the barn, Blossom the cow slept peacefully alongside the chickens. And on the porch, a family sat together, human and orc, husband and wife, parents and child, bound together by choice and love, and the stubborn belief that they deserved happiness as much as anyone else. Quinn thought back to the man he had been a year ago. Lonely, directionless, going through the motions of living without really experiencing it. That man would never have believed where he would end up, would never have imagined the joy and purpose waiting just around the corner, but life had a way of surprising you, of taking your carefully laid plans and throwing them out the window in favor of something infinitely better. All you had to do was be brave enough to say yes when opportunity knocked, even if it came in the most unexpected package imaginable. As winter approached once more, the small family prepared for the cold months ahead. They had stores of food now, enough to last them comfortably. They had a secure home, warm and welcoming. They had friends in the community and the hard-won respect of their neighbors. And they had each other, which was the most important thing of all. On the anniversary of the day they had met, Quinn surprised Makora with a gift, a small wooden carving of a woman and a man standing side by side, their hands clasped together. He had spent weeks working on it in secret, carving late at night after Makora had gone to sleep. "It is us," Makora said wonderingly, tracing the lines with gentle fingers. "It is beautiful, Quinn." "I wanted to commemorate the day my life truly began," Quinn said. The day a brave, beautiful orc woman walked up to a stranger in a marketplace and called him husband. Makora pulled him close, kissing him with a passion that still made his heart race. "Best decision I ever made," she murmured against his lips. "Second best," Quinn corrected, glancing over at Arya, who was playing happily on a blanket nearby. "Best decision was deciding to stay." "No," Makora said firmly. "Those were the same decision. From the moment I chose you, I was choosing this life, this family, this future. Everything that came after was just the natural progression of that first choice." They stood together in their small cabin, holding each other while their daughter played at their feet, and Quinn felt complete in a way he had never experienced before. This was home. Not the building or the land, but the people. The love they shared and the family they had created against all odds. The story that had started with deception had transformed into the most honest relationship Quinn had ever known. They had built something real from a foundation of lies, had turned desperation into devotion and fear into love. They had proven that different did not mean incompatible, that the boundaries people drew between groups were artificial and could be crossed by those brave enough to try. As the years passed, Arya would grow into a strong, intelligent young woman who carried the best qualities of both her parents. She would face her challenges with grace and determination, would help bridge the gap between human and orc communities, and would eventually find her own love story to tell. But that was still to come. For now, in this moment, Quinn was simply grateful. Grateful for the courage that had led Makora to choose him. Grateful for his own impulse toward kindness that had made him say yes. Grateful for every trial they had faced and overcome. Grateful for the unexpected joy that had come from a single moment of desperation in a crowded marketplace. "Thank you," Quinn said again, holding Makora close. "For what this time?" she asked with amusement. "For everything," Quinn said simply. "For calling me husband, for staying, for loving me, for giving me a family and a purpose and a reason to wake up every morning with joy in my heart. For being exactly who you are." Makora's eyes grew misty. "And thank you for seeing me, not an orc or a burden or a problem to be solved, but a person worthy of respect and care and love. Thank you for being my true husband, my partner, my love." They kissed again, long and sweet, while Arya giggled and clapped her small hands. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the world in white. Inside, the fire crackled merrily, filling the cabin with warmth and light. And in that small space, a family lived and loved and proved that the impossible was simply a challenge waiting to be overcome by those brave enough to try. The farm would prosper in the coming years. The community would continue to evolve, slowly becoming more accepting. More children would be born to mixed couples, inspired by Quinn and Makora's example. The world would change, bit by bit, building toward a future where love mattered more than legacy and character counted more than color. But all of that started here in this moment with these three people. A human man who chose kindness, an orc woman who chose courage, and a child who represented hope for a better world. Quinn thought of his mother's words that his heart was too soft for his own good. She had been wrong. His soft heart had led him to this, to the greatest blessing of his life. It had given him the family he had always wanted, the love he had never dared to dream of, and a purpose that went beyond simple survival. As night fell completely and they prepared for bed, Quinn took one last look around the cabin. At his wife, strong and beautiful, preparing their daughter for sleep. At Arya, perfect and precious, already showing signs of the remarkable person she would become. At the home they had built together, filled with love and warmth and the promise of tomorrow. This was his life now. Unexpected, unconventional, absolutely perfect. And it had all started because one desperate woman had looked at him and decided to call him husband. The greatest lie that had ever been told, which had somehow become the most profound truth. Quinn smiled, extinguished the lamp, and joined his family in bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, as all tomorrows did. But they would face it together, as they always had, as they always would. Three hearts beating as one, bound by love stronger than any prejudice, proving every single day that the impossible was simply another word for a love that refused to give up. And in the marketplace of Crossfen, where it had all begun, merchants would tell the story for years to come. Of the orc woman who called a stranger husband, and the human man brave enough to say yes. A love story for the ages, proving that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places, and that true love was not determined by species or status but by the courage to choose each other, again and again, for all the days of their lives.